Hello and welcome everyone to our next episode of Minerva PLM TV. I'm Jennifer Murray, your host, and I have back with me again today, Mark Reisig with Aras. Mark, thank you so much for joining me again today.
Thank you, Jen. It's great to be here.
So the last time that you were on the show, we spent some time talking about your background and how to really lead change initiatives and some of the important steps to take in those initiatives, as well as really thinking about how to impact change for good. Today, I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into something that we touched on a little bit during our last episode with this idea of the digital thread and the digital twin.
Okay, great.
Excellent. So why do you think that digital twins or really the digital thread or both in combination with each other are taking off right now? Why is it so important?
Well, I really don't think you'll be able to compete without it. It's sort of like comparing buying from Amazon versus a Sears catalog. My kids or some younger people might not even know what that is, but you know, the fact is you gain so many insights and are so much more productive. You can't really compete without it.
I guess that makes sense even from a consumer standpoint, because whenever you are on Amazon or really anywhere else out on the internet, the interconnectivity of the data of the types of things that you're looking for and the different options that are available to you at various price points and qualities, and that's a very easy way for people to connect this idea that, you know, everything is connected. But getting deeper into like the manufacturing sector and the business side, I've seen a lot of definitions of the digital twin. How do you define it?
Well, it's an up-to-date virtual replica or digital configuration of a physical asset. So it's you know, and it doesn't have to be. Some people think it has to be exactly like the asset itself. It's whatever you need to actually for the purposes of doing whatever you're doing with that physical asset. But it's a virtual replication of that asset as it exists now, up to date.
So you say it doesn't have to be an exact replica, but when you think twin, well, I mean, I guess there are fraternal twins, but whatever you think twin, you kind of tend to think exact replica. So how is it different to say it's what you need versus an exact replica? Like, what do you need that wouldn't be exactly the same digitally as it would be physically?
Well, let me just give you an example. Let's picture a wind farm with 100 wind turbines out there. What's important is, so you might think, okay, I only need one. They're all the same, so I may only need one. Actually, all 100 are different, right? So what happens is, I'll just give a simple example. The first two show up. They have parts for the second one, but not the first, so they start putting them in the first. Then they'll get the parts for the first, they'll put them in the second. This happens all the time, right? And they actually, so one particular customer that has digital twins, they actually track this. Now, do they have to track everything? Do they have to track every nut, bolt, and screw? It depends on the business, right? Some businesses, it's only the serialized assets that are the most important, right? The example I just gave you, they track an awful lot. They have like up to 8,000 components. And if you're talking about wind turbine number 12, they've got thousands of components that they actually will track. And they need the ability to query something on 12 and trace it back to the as manufactured view, the EBOM view, service guides, requirements, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense to me. Yep, absolutely. So whenever you think about the digital twin and the digital thread and the way in which products are designed today and the physical representations that we often have today tend to be either, you know, the CAD models or maybe some marketing brochures or pictures of the physical product as it's come, you know, off of its manufacturing line and whatnot. What is the what is the controversy with using CAD models and digital twins?
Oh, well, a so a digital, like I just used the example of those 100.
Mm-hmm.
Every 100, they're all different, right? They all have a different kind of physical bill of material. I can switch a part out in number 12, but not in number 11. I can use a certain type of oil with a certain viscosity on 50 of them, but not the other 50, which could cause a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Any reasonably complex product doesn't come from just one piece of CAD geometry. So let's just take the CAD model for a second, right? They might say, well, hey, we do most of it in NX, but the reality is there's other departments, there's many suppliers, so they could use NX, SolidWorks,
AutoCAD,
Inventor, and later on, 2 years later, one could switch, go to Creo, right? So if you're pointing back to one, first off, it's not going to be the number 12 and number 11 are going to be totally different. Not totally different, but you know, they're white, they're 100 yard, they're a football field height, they've got 3 rotors, and they're all white, and that's it. After that, you know, 85% of it is the same, but you know, a lot of parts are switching in and out, and that require a lot of different tools. And so you need to know the data about each of those very specific assets. And then getting back to the CAD, that CAD may have been designed in those things, but
mm-hmm.
visually the people in the field, they just want to see the product, right? So you have to transform that to that, all those different CAD models into something they can see and use.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, they don't even need to, some people's twins, you don't even need to see the geometry. In others, the one example I'm giving you, you do really need to see it because the technicians are oftentimes collaborating and communicating by saying, the thing under the red thing on the right, right? So they're using it to point, and that's how they collaborate. So you have to have this kind of dynamic view of your twin, and that's not a CAD model. That's one specifically for number 12, specifically for the areas they queried. Or another scenario is, let me show all of the 60 hertz turbines around the world that use this part, which is defective. And then boop, they come up, and then you want to see them, right? And you want to see the data associated with them. What's the history? So that's the reason why it's not an engineering CAD model.
So there was a couple of different conferences that I've been to over the years. I can't remember exactly which ones I saw which thing at, but at one I saw an airplane, right? And they took the virtual reality lenses and they were using this in the digital twin representation. And they were showing how there was a guy, you know, out working on an airplane, and he was talking to somebody else back at a warehouse, and the person at the warehouse put on the virtual reality goggles, fully expanded the airplane, was able to actually blow it up and walk directly into the same part of the engine room using this VR technology as the person was, you know, that was actually trying to repair this airplane. And they were, you know, showing the different representations and how the guy working on the airplane could say, yeah, the thing under the red thing on the right, right? So are you saying that really for the later stages of utilizing digital twin data, that you need to have different visualization technologies available to the people that are working with the twin? Or, you know, how are you envisioning that that element of it goes beyond the CAD?
So the CAD basically has to be transformed into more of a product vision of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as it's being manufactured, it can be used that way. Service can use it that way. right? In engineering, it's okay for everybody in their specific little domain areas to work in whatever they need to work in. But ultimately, people are talking about the physical thing, whether it's in manufacturing or it's already deployed out in the field. They're talking about the physical thing, and when they query it or want to know about it, they're talking about the product, right? Not in engineering terms, not CAD geometry or whatever.
Okay.
So that's why it has to be, each of them have to be kind of transformed.
So into more model-based data assets.
Yes.
Perfect.
And you're typically querying them using product, PLM, PLM type queries. Like, you know, show me all the such and such parts that were maintained in the last month, right? And just those would show up. And then from those, you should be able to click on those and go anywhere across the digital thread, right?
Now that's a very practical application.
Yes. So for like in the wind turbine example, where the OEM has access to that, that's different than an MRO, which is isolated and not connected to the PLM. But you know, where you can control it, you're going to have huge benefits, because it's not just the performance data that comes off. It's more about, you know what the customer needs. So you can go to them and give them an upgrade, or try to sell them something new, or there are many things that you can figure out problems with your own design. So your new product introductions are going to happen faster. Your maintenance people are clearly going to be out there with the right tools, being able to do a lot of things remotely. So there's huge benefits, many more things, right? I've seen this before there was any performance data or any IoT. And even just then, as soon as everything was connected, the engineers just saw obvious problems where people were fixing things every 6 months, thinking that was normal.
Right.
And the engineers were like, "Whoa, you know,
not normal."
They had no access back to the requirements, which said that should last for 5 years. You know, so but once that thread was in place, now people will know pretty instantly that there's a problem with that new part that we just put out, or that new product.
And that makes a lot of sense, that once you're able to close that loop and bring the information back to the fold from the service, but also being able to push information out to service so that you can do things like one call repairs, because the person is actually prepared to fix the right thing because they knew what was in it. And then, you know, just that cycle continues. So definite benefits, not only from the business side, but from the customer side as well, the customer experience. So that's really cool. You mentioned really briefly there, kind of traversing the digital thread and looking at the requirements. Can you expand on that a little bit about how that works and why it's important?
Yeah, so kind of using that same example, if I'm on Digital Twin wind turbine number 12 and I actually click on a part, if I want to see if you think there's some discrepancy, you can go off and look at the as shipped bill of material. You could go back and the as manufactured bill of material, the M-BOM, the E-BOM, any service bulletins that would be up to date against that part. You can have basically closed loop quality. And the cool thing I like is you can go back to the requirements and see the parameters that are being set, that need to be set, are actually set correctly. Oftentimes the simplest failures are just because things are running in conditions that you hadn't anticipated. And now you have access to all of this data. And it's not just, I'm giving you the example of the service technician, but anyone can just visually look at a 3D not 3D. They can visually look at a graphical representation of the thread. And now the products are so complex. It's difficult to remember what you did, or you have no knowledge of what the last guy did. So it's one thing to run all these simulations and then it goes out into the field. Now something's happened and you want to go back and relook at the simulations. You can go back and see all the simulations, all the results that were came back, and oh, by the way, simulation you forgot all about. Maybe it wasn't even run before. So you can rerun them all, and with accurate data coming off an actual twin, right? Not some model that's outdated.
Right.
So there are many use cases for the digital twin that make the whole company way more collaborative. You get to see everything. There was I forget the author's name. Grant is his last name. Adam Grant. Adam Grant used this analogy talking about companies where you got 12 people on a jury, but in a company, instead of a jury, each person gets to see 1/12 of the testimony, right? And that's kind of how companies are set up, and how they work without a digital thread, right? You only see some of the data. And then the other factor is who's going to make the decisions on what to do next. Oftentimes it ends up being hunches or even a kind of majority rules in that jury, right? Eight people vote in favor of making a new product, 4 don't. And the reality is none of them have enough information, right? And it's not a democracy. It's not equal. Some people have more information, more pertinent information. So the digital thread allows everybody to see more of the data and communicate with each other, where it used to be a ticket or maybe an email or a phone call, or they would send pictures back and forth. Or I've seen people get on planes and fly from the East Coast of the United States to Korea back. And then I've seen them get on a plane and go back again and come back. So now you can do a lot of this work remotely, right? Less people communicating, better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I love the idea of being able to see all of the connected data like in a graphical representation where you have a node and then all of the different areas that shoot off of that node and how they're interconnected. And then my favorite part, being able to actually link back to the requirement that initially ended you up at this place to begin with. Like, how was that satisfied?
That's absolutely great. That's something we can do now that we were never able to easily do in the past. And boy, it's an eye opener.
Yes.
Because all of these problems that used to occur very quickly, typically solved before things get in the field, and they're easily resolved afterward now. So yeah, that it's absolutely great compared to, we were living in the dark ages before.
Yeah, so many papers, so many files, so many binders, so many people running all over the place. Like, I know we did that. How can we prove it? So this is great. I love the direction that we're going. What do you think is the biggest challenge for the digital thread and the digital twin today?
So I always focus on one, but there's absolutely two. So I think it's data interoperability, because if you move across an open platform with a digital thread and a digital twin, and that's ideal, but you're always going to be dealing with different systems. And so you're going to have to federate data back and forth. So if I have like a model-based systems engineering application, it's what we like to use. It's got some of those anchor elements have to be part of that digital thread, right? So it has to be open enough to be able to connect in there. You don't want to spend the rest of your life just trying to hardwire integrations from one piece of software to another version of another one, because they're going to change, right? And to have everything wired up like that is going to be very costly. So you want this to be as smooth as possible and as transparent as possible. And I'm very optimistic, because I don't think anyone that is going to try to not be open about how they communicate with data. I don't think they're going to last very long, because the world of new smart connected products is just getting way too complicated. So you have to have a digital thread in order to see everything, because the human brain can't keep all that data in your head. And if you can't easily get data to and from a product, it's going to cease to exist. But I think that's the main challenge now, because not everybody's there. And then the second one would be the security on the sensors. So people have jumped out and immediately rushed to the, I'm going to create a performance IoT, have something up and running, and they'll attach it to a CAD model, and they'll put the results in a data lake, and they really end up with a lot of nothing. But even if they did it right, even if you had kind of a digital twin is basically made up of a configured twin and a performance capability, IoT capability. You can't, if you don't have an up-to-date configured twin, you're not going to have a performance digital twin. It's not going to work well at all. It's kind of like Google Maps. So when we put in the destination and everything, and we go there. Now, every once in a while, you should be updating that, because what you're really updating is the map.
Yes.
Right?
Construction, somebody put in a lake.
Exactly. The to and from is kind of like the performance, right? But if there's construction, or the road just, there's a dead end there now due to construction, that's not doing you any good. You're like, it's telling you to move forward, and you can't go forward. So that's why it's important to have that accurate configured digital twin aspect, and then the performance digital twin working with that. Now, my fear, and it's been realized. There are, I forget the number, but it's in the millions of people have hacked into IoT devices from close to 500,000 different IP addresses. So
that's
all the money,
large number.
It's a really large number, right? And you don't want teenagers controlling your digital twins, right?
Can you imagine?
Because I remember I was sort of like the kid in war games, right? So I built computers. After my story of not working on a desktop computer. I made one before IBM did, with a lot of IBM devices, or a lot of devices that would ultimately be used. And and back then I experimented getting into everything. Not saying I hacked into anything, but today they're making it ridiculously easy by people just very quickly trying to move at a very fast pace, thinking they have to get stuff up and running, and they're not thinking about the security aspect to it. So again, I think this is quite solvable, but it's an absolute challenge. You don't want, we go to enough trouble to make sure that people can't get into our systems, inside our firewalls of the companies and inside PLM systems. But to put a little sensor and allow people
to connect that way,
to attempt to get in, is crazy. It's kind of like just putting a thumb drive on the most, you're the most secure network in the world, but you're allowing someone access with a free thumb drive to just steal anything they want.
Right.
So
going back to the interoperability for a moment, what do you think are some steps that companies can or should take to start to address that challenge? Like how do we work together to solve the data interoperability challenge?
So I know people will want me to say standards, but I worked on standards bodies forever. And the problem with standards is people are off to the next thing while they're still working on the standard. So I'm okay with standards, but basically, and they're not close in the PLM or digital thread area of what data, and the data changes for every type of company. So it's mostly just open access, documented access to the services or the APIs that allow you to get at the data. And it's no different even before you had a digital twin, right? So if I have an ERP system or an ES system or whatever it is, we need to know what data goes in, what data comes out, and the ability to handle that. So we can have a continuous, every company has a continuous digital thread. It's unique to them as they make it. But you are going to need access to some of these systems that won't have the attributes just the way you want them, right? This was the problem when I was in the PLM federation business, right? I can't take 20 attributes from one system and fit them into 12 in another.
Right.
Right. So you're gonna go with 12. Well, I say that. Hopefully these 12 are just part of the whole solution. So you can end up having 200 if you want. But where you're missing something, that creates a problem. So it's really important to kind of map that out. That's why I always say data governance across the whole digital thread is important, because I can map one attribute to another, but I need to know that there's something there to map it to. And that's the advantage of having platforms that cut all the way across. But as long as they're open and people can get to their data, that's key, because you never want to have it where you can't get it, you can't migrate it to the next version of something that might be better. Right. So.
Well, this has been excellent, Mark. Thank you so much. Great primer on the digital twin and digital thread. Looking forward to reading more of your blogs in the future about these topics, and of course, working with interoperability and the future of spanning cross-industry and enabling those great business processes for companies with products that need to be serviced and beyond, which are almost all products, almost all products. Anything
Thanks,
else
Jen.
that you'd like to share with us today?
No, it's been great. Thanks a lot.
Awesome.
And
thank you.
Jen, if anyone has any questions,
Oh yeah, would you like to provide your email address, or can they just reach you on the blog?
Yeah, they can either way. I'm Reisig, Reisig @aras.com.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Mark. And to all of our viewers, thank you again for joining us. Have a question that you want answered in a future session, drop your comments below or send me an email at jmo@minerva-plm.com. Like this session, be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to be alerted to future content. And if you'd like to be interviewed on a session of Minerva PLM TV, don't hesitate to ask. I'd love to help you share your story too. Thanks so much and have a great day.